Hello everyone, and welcome back to Inside ArtScroll, where the books you read and the people who write them come to life. Today we are joined by a special guest from Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Dovid Orlofsky. Thank you, Rabbi Dovid, for being here. It's a real treat. I know you just got here 2 days ago, I believe.
What a privilege to be in the ArtScroll studios. This is very exciting.
So for the short period of time...
I'm here with the greats of the greats. I saw on the wall outside the people who've made this show already. So, my gosh, I'm walking among giants.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for gracing us here. So in the limited amount of time that we have, I have...
That's a Moshe Haskell in general for life. So
Yes, exactly. We want a chaperein.
That's right.
It's not every day that we get to sit with you and schmooze. So let's start off, which I'm sure you've done many times, giving our viewers a little background about your background, where you come from, what shaped you, who shaped you, and then we'll get into some specific topics.
So I come from a little shtet in Long Island called North Merrick. Most people have never heard of it. People have heard of Merrick. Merrick is an upper class, nice neighborhood, very Jewish. North Merrick is a lower middle class neighborhood with almost no Jews, and I grew up over there, and I ended up. We went to a conservative synagogue. My father worked Shabbos, and Rabbi Findel started a day school in Long Island called the Hebrew Academy.
Zechariah Findel?
His brother.
His brother.
Meir Findel.
Okay.
So Zeiger und Stark. He started a day school called the Hebrew Academy of Nassau County, and he convinced my father to send. I'm one of 6 boys, but the 3 younger boys, we all went to Hank, and I came from a home where the values weren't quite there that we were learning at school, so I lived 2 lives, and then I had a Rebbe in 8th grade, Rabbi Yaakov Whale, ArtScroll book.
Sure.
He put out House the famous Calls to Eternity,
right,
about his mother, yeah.
And he put out a famous Haggadah with answers.
Yeah, right,
well.
right.
Sure.
And he just was so aggressive because we were apathetic, Long Island kids, suburban kids, and he shook us up. And I always felt that I had a midas ha'emes, and I fought with him, and he wiped the floor with me, which I was not used to because I'm really very good at arguing. And I remember I said to my friends, I said, we have to fight with this guy. They said, just ignore him. I said, but what if he's right? They said, ignore him anyway. And I couldn't do that. And I had to change my life. And I slowly became Shomer Torah mitzvahs by the time my bar mitzvah rolled around. And I got with the program. And so...
and what was it like doing that when your parents were behind you, not with them leading you?
Oh, I had to fight with them constantly. Luckily, I wasn't home the night that my brother burnt down the kitchen because they were sure I was behind it, but I wasn't home. And because there were kashrus problems that I was having issues with. And then they, Mohammed Lieben Gomer, we burned the whole place down. I said, once we're rebuilding already, let's put in this, let's change that, let's do this.
And they cooperated?
Yeah. In other words, my father would argue and then he would give in. And he still felt that I was wrong, but he would give in anyway because my father grew up in an Orthodox home. He just had no Jewish education, so he didn't know. It was interesting, if I had to label my parents, and labeling is such a difficult thing, I would say they were non-practicing Orthodox Jews. Hashkafically, they were Orthodox, but their life didn't, he was in the flower business, and the flower business, Saturday's the biggest day, and like I said, he had no Jewish education, so, but he remembered what he remembered. So, so Shabbos, he had to work Shabbos. But if you walked around the house in your socks, he went crazy. What do you want me to die? Oh, we couldn't figure out what that was. I was a kid. He says to me, you marry a shiksa, you're out of the will. I didn't know what a will was. I didn't know what a shiksa was. But I go, okay, Dad. I was like, because they were very Jewish and they were very proud Jews. And they felt these things are very chazak, but he didn't have that education. When he finally became Shomer Shabbos, 67 years old, it came to him very naturally. He adopted that lifestyle. So we had arguments about everything, but go explain, secret and Davashan Muskaven, you know what I mean? What difference does it make every time you turn on, the light in the refrigerator goes, every time you turn on the faucet, somewhere a pump is going on, something's happening, So I tried to explain these things as best I could. In the end, he would give in, but, it prepared me for later in life because when I started Yeshiva Gedola and I ended up going to Chofetz Chaim, I knew hashkafically so much more than any other person my age because I had to argue everything through.
Wow.
And it gave me a tremendous background in hashkafa that most people don't get.
But it's unbelievable that as a child you had that fortitude when today so many children who are being given Yiddishkeit on a silver platter are struggling with it, and here you were in the opposite environment, fighting for what's right.
So that's one of the reasons that so many people don't appreciate it, because they never had to fight for it. Mm-hmm. If you have to fight for something, it's that much more valuable to you. And so that's why Torah is a milchama. It's a milchamas Torah. You have to fight for it. You have to, the Chazal say that unless you learn something wrong, you'll never learn it right. Mm-hmm. You have to struggle to find the emes. And, I was a Rebbe in Yeshiva for many years, and this is the de facto position of the average kid in Shir today. Go ahead, Rebbe. Tell me anything you think might interest me. Rabbi Findel told me he used to go to a Shir by Rav Hutner, Zatzal, and he says it was in a small room, and it was crowded. It was hard to hear him. And he said to one of the organizers, why don't we move this to the auditorium, give him a microphone? And he said, because Rav Hutner holds B'shita, you have to struggle to hear, to listen, and to understand. This is not a entertainment. Rav Moshe Shapiro fought for many years before he agreed to take a microphone in Shir, because he wanted you to give a daher. Like they say in Musa, noch a daher, you have to listen. So I used to remember, Reb Tzvi Kushalevsky in Shir would say this all the time. He goes, "Ani omer ze od pam, aval ta'azin tov tov." Then listen. You have to listen, and that's a hard thing for a generation that's used to having everything given to them, like you say, on a silver platter, and you have to struggle. It's the struggle that makes it meaningful. Lefum tzara agra, going to the efforts, the reward.
After you left, you went to Yeshiva Chofetz Chaim,
right,
where you learned by Reb Henoch.
I was actually in a number of branches. I was in ArtScroll with Rabbi Chait and Rabbi Kinneret. Mm-hmm. I was in Forest Hills with Rav Henoch. I was in Rochester with Rabbi Dovid Harris, who now is the Rosh Yeshiva. He was Rosh Yeshiva in Rochester. So and eventually I made my way to Los Angeles with Shaya Cohen was the Rosh Yeshiva, and I did some teaching and I did some learning, and that's when I stumbled into NCSY, and by accident. And I was tricked into taking my first NCSY chapter, and it turned out that I had a real chush for this particular line of work, and I started being offered regions all over the country, and I took Long Island, which had 5 directors in 2 years, and it was deader than dead. And there was actually one paid member in the region when I took over. And I built that up, and I found I had a real talent in Kiruv and informal education. And I was there for 9 years, and then I moved to ArtScroll to sit and learn. My original plan was I would sit and learn and then go into Rabbanis. And instead I stayed in ArtScroll, and I found chinuch opportunities there.
So you were teaching in Eretz Yisrael?
Yeah.
Seminaries?
Seminaries and yeshivas. I was mashgiach in Yeshiva Or David. I taught in Derech program in Or Sameach. I used to teach in HaTorah. And I also taught in seminaries, and I really had a very varied aspect where, I used to teach in Or Golah. I was training Rabbanim, and I went from there to, Nevei Yerushalayim, where I was teaching girls who were just really newcomers to Judaism, and basically everything in between. So I found, which was very interesting, I had a real ability as a Gemara teacher. And that's a very hard thing to do, to keep kids interested in the Gemara. I had one kid who said to me, he came back shana bet on condition that he didn't have to learn Gemara. And the Yeshiva convinced him to come to my shir. And he said, if I had a Rebbe like this, I would have learned Gemara my whole life. You know, so to make the Gemara come alive, I once spoke for the Koilo and Elizabeth. They have a Yom Yun on national holiday, so I think I spoke there on Thanksgiving. And so I said, what do you want me to talk about? He says, talk about Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, Rambam. You know, you say a shir. I was like, okay, I have never been asked to do that on the speaker circuit. Mm-hmm. And he called me up afterwards. He says, I'm getting a lot of pressure. They said, you don't bring Orlofsky in to give a Gemara shir. So do an hour of the Gemara shir, do 45 minutes of Gemara shir and 15 minutes of whatever your usual shtick is. You know? So I did. He says, I made a mistake. People enjoyed the Gemara shir so much, you could have gone on for that for the full hour. Oh. So I enjoyed very much teaching boys, teaching Gemara. I do an online daf yomi today through my website, and to make the daf come alive and be exciting and be interesting and be relevant and meaningful, that's a challenge, mm-hmm. and I take it very seriously. So I teach boys, I teach girls, I give 2 online Mesilas Yesharim shiurim. It's a challenge. You have to make Torah alive for our kids, and that's the biggest challenge. Is that kids? A kid says this. Everybody has heard this from a kid. Rebbe, why are we learning this? I don't have an ox. I'm not planning on buying one. I don't run through the street with pictures. If I marry a woman, it'll be with a ring, not with a piece of silk of indeterminate value. If I divorce her, it'll be in Beis Din. I won't throw the get from my roof into her chotzer where it catches on fire on the way down. And that's the biggest challenge. Why am I learning? Relevance. People want to feel that this has meaning to my life. And I always say you find this a few times in the Gemara. Who cares? Mada hava hava. In Daf Yomi they're doing Yuma now. It says it over there. It's a Gemara in Ksubas. Mada hava hava. We're not learning history. If we're learning a pasuk or a Rashi or a Gemara or a halacha, it's because it has to have relevance to my life today. Mm-hmm. It has to have meaning for me today. Otherwise, we wouldn't be learning it. And
what is one of the biggest differences that you've seen in the questions being posed to you in Kiruv Rechokim versus Kiruv Kroivim?
Kiruv Rechokim, people want to know why. And in Kiruv Kroivim, they know why. They're saying, it's not working for me. I'm not happy. I'm not enjoying this. Shabbos doesn't make me happy. Learning doesn't make me happy. Torah doesn't make me happy. You understand? I'm not enjoying this. One of the greatest fulfillments I've gotten over the years is that when a parent tells me, he goes, I have a kid not interested in anything, but he listens to your recordings. He listens to your shiurim. He says, it's just more entertaining than the Goyish comics. I was in scholar residence once in a Pesach hotel, and the seminary girls who took care of the day camp, they said, listen, we miss all your shiurim. Could you do something for us at night when we finish? I said, sure. So I was giving a shiurim per and a bunch of the guests were coming. So the director said, listen, this is not part of our agreement. I said, I'm not going to charge you for this. I actually like teaching. He goes, good, then I'll put it in the bulletin. Mm-hmm. And I was getting more people coming to my shir than were going to the entertainment program, the show. And one of them said, he says, it's pretty sad when the rabbi is more entertaining, giving a Pirkei shir than the entertainer, because you have to figure out, how does Torah speak to me, make it enjoyable, It has to be something that's sweet to our kids. And that's what it is. I heard Rabbi Shapiro say this once. He says, I understand why a kid wants to go off. If you're going to take away the pleasures in my life, you better show me you got something better for me than what I've got. And that's, I have this podcast that I give, and I talk about different things, and I've gotten letters from guys who feel like they were not able to sit and learn. They didn't enjoy it. It wasn't meaningful. He goes, the only Torah learning I have in my week is your podcast. I watch this because it's enjoyable, because it makes me feel good. That's what Torah has to be. It has to be that Shabbos is something beautiful, that I heard one of my kids tell another one of my kids, it says, I love Hanukkah in our home. Hanukkah, the Pesach Seder, Shabbos, it's got to be something where a person says, wow, I'm enjoying this. I like this. It's fun. And that's the challenge.
Well, people know that you infuse humor into everything you do.
I try.
And that brings out the joy, and perhaps that's why in the hotel program or wherever it is, people want to go to hear Rabbi Orlofsky because they know that they're going to smile, they know they're going to feel good, and they know that they're getting the substance at the same time.
I had somebody once who was re-listening to some of my show, and they go, you say a lot of deep things. I said, what are you trying to do, kill my parnasa? Just say he's funny. I know what I'm saying. Somebody said to me once, he goes, you realize he's saying very stark Musa? How does he get away with this? He goes, he's funny. If you're funny, you can say anything you want.
But what you were talking about before segues well to something I wanted to ask you, and this goes back to a shiur that I listened to from you about 20 years ago. And you made a very, very poignant observation that if you would take the average Jewish child and give them the opportunity to press a button and be born into a different family, a non-Jewish family, without all the obligations, without all the commandments, and without all the many things that he may not understand, many a Jewish child will choose to press that button. And you analyzed it. Could you take a moment and apply it now, 20 years after I first heard you mention it, as to why that is, and what could we be doing better to make sure that no Jewish child will ever want to push that button?
So I just have to tell you a story that a Rebbe in a Mesivta, very from Mesivta, and I don't want to mention where or what, but he says, I tried this myself. I asked my boys in Mesivta, and they all said, yeah, sure, I'd push the button. yeah, I would choose not to be Jewish. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing, and I've seen this myself over the years. It's only become stronger. The reason is, I think, because unfortunately so much of chinuch comes down to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is angry and disappointed with you, and people internalize that message. So I've asked audiences over the years, do you think Hashem loves you? So at the beginning, people couldn't answer, but now the Kiruv movement has been around long enough, so we know the correct answer. Yes, Hashem loves me. And then I say, does Hashem like you? Very hard question for a firm Jew to answer. And then I say, is Hashem impressed with you? And almost no firm person can say yes. Because we've been taught, Hashem is disappointed in you. Hashem will wait for you to the last day to see if you do tshuva, but if not, then he will cast you into the pit of Gehenna, where you will, burn for, terrible, painful experience because he loves you and wants you to have a tikkun, So a person, as one person put it to me, I feel like I'm walking a greased tightrope over hell. Hashem's always going to be angry with me. We're always going to be disappointed with me. I tell you, you ever hear the traveling Hasidim? Mm-hmm. So I spoke once at a Project Inspired convention, and one of them came over and said, we're your Hasidim. Because you're the only person still teaching real Hasidus. Right. I said, what? Because I'm a real dyed-in-the-wool Litvak, Mm-hmm. He says, no. The idea of Hashem loving you and the simcha and this and that Hasidus was based on, he says, you don't find that today. He says, this is the message people have to hear. Hashem loves you. Hashem believes in you. Hashem is rooting for you. Hashem is impressed with you. He thinks, listen, after 2,000 years of all the suffering that we've gone through, the fact that a person is willing to stand up today and say, I'm a firm Jew, and all the abuse you get today, and how many people hate us and all the difficulty and stuff like and the pressure, of all the mitzvahs that have to be done and the expectations. The fact that a person is willing to stand up and be counted, how invaluable that is in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we don't hear that. We don't tell that to our kids.
But I think some nowadays may have taken the Hashem loves me mantra all the way to the other end, where it's Hashem loves me, and he's going to love me, and I could do what I want to do or act the way I want to, and there's almost that lack of the schar v'einish balance.
Yeah.
So that there does have to be some kind of balance. As a Talmud of Moshe Shapiro, as someone who has heard so much from one of the greatest Baalei Machshava of our generation.
Yeah, I really don't find that. In fact, if you find the kids who go off, they're sure Hashem hates them. Mm-hmm. Hashem hates me, my parents hate me, society hates me, my Rebbeim hate me, everybody's disappointed in me. You know? And if you start talking to them, they're like, okay, fine, I'm a Russia, okay? You happy? Okay, I'm a Russia. You don't hear them saying like, hey, everything's great, everything's fine, I can do what I want, Hashem loves me. You know what I mean? They really feel that they're playing a game they can't win. So why bother playing? They've given up. Listen, when I was a kid, and I'm going back some years, people went off the derech. You know what they did? They went to college, they got a job, they got married, they had children, and they didn't keep Shabbos. Today, when a kid goes off the derech, they dress like a laundry pile. They can't get out a coherent sentence. My rabbi, They smoke like a chimney, or they do drugs, or there's nothing. They become chayme b'litzura, because I know what MS is, and I can't do it. So I just give up. It's not that I don't believe. They believe very strongly, but I can't. I'm playing a game I can't win.
Is one worse than the other, where someone's more intellectually adversarial versus just, doing whatever they want?
Because when a kid goes off today, and you see he just becomes nothing, nothing. Yeah, it's because he believes that no one believes in him. He believes that Hashem is out to get him. He believes that he's going to burn in Gehenna, and there's no hope and there's no choice. And I hate to say it, this didn't come from a vacuum. They've heard this from people. David Kaplan used to write a column in the Hamodia called Anecdotes and Anecdotes. And in the anecdotes, you hear these stories of teachers who I guess in their mind they really meant well, but they hurt kids terribly. Mm-hmm. And when a person feels that love, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you, and Hashem believes in you, and of course you're going to mess up. My wife, who's much smarter than I am, she's the intellectual of the family, so she always says, high schools only want kids who don't need high school. It used to be, you understood that high school was, a time where you're going to grow, and you're going to this, and you're going to, mess up a little bit, And today, everyone says, we take only the best kids. Best kids. Rabbi Elazar Langzim, who's a very, very smart person, tremendous Talmid Chacham. He said to me once, he goes, what is the best 8th grader? Isn't that your job? He goes, it doesn't say much about you as a mechanech if you can only educate the best kids. Don't you know how to take somebody and develop them and build them? You're incapable of that. So we have to calm down a little bit, give people a little space, understand that kids are kids. And, we have to reassure them, and we have to teach them to have self-respect. In the old times, Rav Hutner said this already back in the 60s. He says, all the schmoozing in Europe about gaiva, that's not for America, because they didn't have a fancy word like self-esteem. He says they have to learn self-worth. They don't think they're worth anything. They don't think that what they do matters, that it makes a difference. I had a girl, second year in seminary, she said to me, we get these lists of people who are sick to say Tehillim for, I daven. Sometimes they get better, sometimes they die, but it has nothing to do with me. Does the average person really believe I say a tefillah and that person's going to get healthy, that person's going to have a child, that person's going to get a parnasa, that person's going to find a shidduch? We don't believe that, because we're not worth anything. Go find a Gadol b'Yisrael to daven, but me, I'm going to daven for somebody. I'm going to change the world and change somebody's life. Mm-hmm. I believe it, and for the record, I am not a Gadol b'Yisrael, but I believe that I can daven and say, I'm going to change someone's life, and I'm going to bring Mashiach. If it's not us, who? What percentage of Klal Yisrael is still left around, to be able to change the world? That means it's our davening. So you know why people don't daven? Kadosh Baruch Hu cares what I say. It makes a difference what I say. That's why people speak Lashon Hara, because you think it makes a difference what I say. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what they do, what they say, what they do. Everyone's walking scared. Everybody's afraid. I started yeshiva, giveaway. I started yeshiva in 1964. And we got a message. You're a hero because you are keeping Torah alive. I mean, at that point, every shul that was opening was a conservative synagogue. Torah was dead. Pesach Krohn says this all the time. I used to say it my own, but he said it. I'd rather quote him. Yeah, he says the change took place in 1976 when the ArtScroll Megillas Esther came out. Because until then, my generation, we only had Sonsino. You could read pages and I come across a Jew. Forget about a Torah personality. It was all Christian Bible scholars, And suddenly ArtScroll came out and it was okay to be from. But when I started school in 1964, if you were an Orthodox Jew, you were an object of derision. And so we came in and it didn't matter if you were good or bad. They used to say, we can't afford to throw a kid out. We don't have enough of them. Right. Today, every kid gets a message. We don't need you here. I got 2-3 kids waiting to take your place. You don't like it? Get out. And so a kid feels like, I'm not needed. The school doesn't need me. My rebbeim don't need me. Everybody's running scared. Everyone's disappointed in me. Hashem is angry with me, And then you wonder why there's a lack of happiness. Whereas the Mesilas Yesharim says, why are we in this world? To get pleasure from the delight in Hashem. Is that message coming across to our kids? When I say that over, it's the shir that you're quoting. It's from a line from a shir called "Why Be Jewish." It's always my go-to shir. The first thing that I hear from parents is two things. One is, if this is true, why are you the only one saying it? I said it's not true, and I show you shiurim from across the board, people who say this. And the second question is, why is no one teaching this to our children? And that's a harder question to answer. Why isn't that the message that kids get? HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you. The greatest thing is Hashem, to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If I walk in and I think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is angry at me and disappointed in me and isn't happy with me, do I want to daven? Do I want to learn? Do I want to be part of a system where I know I'm failing before I even start? But if you say Hashem loves you, Hashem believes in you, Hashem is rooting for you, and Hashem created the whole world just because he wants to be close to you, that's a paradigm shift.
There are many people out there who need to hear this message.
100,000%.
That you're giving. One way that they could get the message is actually in this book, which came out 2 years ago. I should mention it's a transcription of many of your lectures. That was very well done. Tell our viewers what other ways, if someone wants to tap into the joy of Yiddishkeit of Rabbi Orlofsky, where could they go? What could they do? How could they tap into it?
So I have a podcast every week. It comes out it's on Torah Anytime, and there are other places you can listen to it if you know anything about technology, which I don't, but I know it is over there. And this is I used to give a shir every other Motzi Shabbos in Har Nof, and I used to ask people who came a lot, well, why do you come? And one answer I got was, this is the only place I come where I walk out feeling good that I'm a firm Jew. Now, that's sad, not because the message I'm giving. My friend Rabbi Yitzchak Summers, who's a Reverend in Los Angeles, he says that he told this once to Rabbi Cheskel Sarner's son in Yerushalayim. And he says, what do you mean? This is basic Judaism. What I'm saying is basic Judaism. Of course it's the Mesilas Yesharim. Of course it's everything. His father wrote a Yunim on Mesilas Yesharim, Rabbi Cheskel Sarner. He says, of course, everybody knows this. But in the last door, you didn't have to say this because everyone knew it. But when they came to America, people didn't have the background that they had. So we spent our time focusing on mitzvah observance, right? So I always give the example, right? We give out the color-coded charts for the matzah. And everyone's careful to get the matzah and measure out the matzah and eat it, remember, with the haseber and all the things. And then I asked someone, why do we eat matzah? Because the Jews left Egypt so quickly their bread didn't have a chance to rise. I said, so let it rise now. Right? If you make challah dough and it doesn't rise in 18 minutes, just wait. It might take 45 minutes, it will rise. And then we can eat challahs. I said, that's not even the part that bothers me. I said, everybody's running around. We can't leave Egypt. The mitzvah have been screaming at us since midnight. Get out, get out. Right? We're collecting gold and silver. We're running around. We're cutting down trees. We're doing everything. And suddenly comes noontime. Gans Klal Yisrael decides what a great time to bake bread. And then we got rushed out of Egypt because who could have seen that coming? someone says to me, yeah. I said, you spend so much time on the performance of the mitzvah that you don't know why? You don't stop to think why? And that's, unfortunately, the thing is that we, it's the opposite. I was asked once to speak in a Beis Yaakov, about questions, how to answer basic questions. I used to teach this to Rabbanim in Ola, and someone in the school said, we don't want the kids to ask questions. It'll lessen their emunah. So don't ask any questions. Somebody said to me, this boy has hashkafa problems. He doesn't know if he believes in Hashem. He doesn't know if he believes in Har Sinai. I said, that's not hashkafa problems. I said, he has other problems, right? He gets up late. He's not successful in his learning, So he asks questions, I said, tell me the guy is davening, he's learning, and you find him in the Beis Medrash 3 o'clock in the morning reading Spinoza. that's a hashkafa problem. It's not a hashkafa problem. He says, we know that, all you have to do is say, I don't believe in this. And everyone goes, whoa, Right. But it's not real. It's not coming from a real place. And if you confront the issues are not really the issues. The issues are, how come I'm not happy? How come I'm not feeling a simcha in my yahadus? And that's an art form for us to be able to give our kids a Shabbos. People ask me, how do you make your kids sit at the Shabbos table? I said, I don't. My goal is to make the Shabbos table such a warm, welcoming place that people want to sit there. And our Shabbos meals go on for a very long time. Well, part of the problem is that we eat too much, but also because you want to make it interesting and entertaining enough. And I look at it from a kid's point of view. So I had a tekufa when my kids were teenagers, and they weren't such happy campers, And so I would ask questions, thought questions. I would tie it into something in the parsha, and then I would say, do you think you should bring your kids up in an only frum neighborhood without exposed to anything? Or in a mixed neighborhood where they'll meet different types of people? And they would argue, because teenagers love to give their opinions. They would argue. And whenever I would do this, people would say to me afterwards, and what did you tell them? I said, nothing. That's the point. I want them to be able to sit there and talk. Just talk and talk and talk and talk. And they'll sit at the Shabbos table and give their opinions. Gavaldik. I have to say, and here's the right answer. That's the whole problem. Teachers say, what do you think? Okay, we don't really care what you think. Here's the right answer. Let people think, let people talk. It's love it. So they would sit at the Shabbos table and give their opinions, Gavaldik. The older I get...
As you say, everyone's entitled to my
opinion. Let people talk. And that's why the older I get, I have mastered the skill of keeping my mouth shut. I haven't mastered it, but I've gotten a lot better at it. Letting people talk. People love to hear themselves talk, and I encourage it.
Well, thank you for the messages of positivity.
Are we out of time?
I think so. I think they're signaling to us.
I could
that we have to wrap this up. I thought we were just getting started. We were just getting started, but apparently time is short, and you have to go. But we really appreciate. I want to thank you.
Amaruba.
And there's malacha maruba in chinuch. There's no question about it. It's a daunting task nowadays, and you've infused all of us, parents, mechanchim, with hope that we could infuse that joy,
happiness.
That simchas hachayim, simcha being a yid, and not being scared of questions. And like you just said, not always do you have to give the answers.
No,
very often the answers will come out by themselves.
We go to the Seder and we do things to get people to ask questions. We want them to ask questions. If they ask questions, they care. The bane of Jewish education is apathy.
Right.
Where they feel this is not relevant to my life. If they're asking questions, it's gewaldig. We encourage that.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for the encouragement.
May you
be zeicha to continue to infuse that chizuk in Yidden, both in Eretz Yisrael, where you live in Har Nof, and when we're zeicha, us still here in Chutz La'aretz, to have you in our presence. Thank you.
Thank you so
Continued
much.
hatzlacha.
My pleasure. And listen, it's like I said, I'm quoting Pesach Kron saying it, but I was saying it beforehand. You have changed the face of Torah in America.
Thank you.
And with the ArtScroll Gemaras, in Eretz Yisrael too. It's like. It's just impossible,
Well, that's credit to our incredible team here, from Rabbi Zlotowitz, Rabbi Sherman, Rabbi Brander, and down.
I was in a Daf Yomi Chabura, before I started giving the shir, and they had the ArtScroll Yerushalayim, Shkolim, and it would be like you're turning and you're turning and you're turning and you're turning and you're turning. It's Amid Bays, and they're turning and they're turning. So it's a Herculean task, and the one that I definitely appreciate.
Thank you so much.